Everybody, we are back, and now we are having Nivanka and Lawrence telling us a little bit about Silverstripe for destination management. Guys, the stage is yours.
All right, thanks, Julian.
Thanks, Julian. Yep.
Yeah, we're very happy to be here, and I'm in New Zealand. We'll talk more about that in a second, but we're here to talk about some destination management and how we've achieved things from a business perspective and a coding perspective. So just as an intro, Nivanka Fonseka, he'll be speaking second in this presentation, based in Colombo, Sri Lanka. Nivanka has a background in computer science, founded Silverstripe, which is started as an outsourcing company in 2010, deals pretty much exclusively in Silverstripe development and has a team of 10 there. I'm based in Christchurch, New Zealand. I owned a digital agency for 20 years, sold it 5 years ago now. And essentially my role is really marketing and digital strategist. And I've specialized in destination marketing for 10 years now. And I've worked with Tourism New Zealand, Tourism Industry Aotearoa, a number of RTOs, regional tourism organisations, and DMOs, being destination marketing organisations, both in New Zealand and US for the last 20 years. And just as sort of a quick intro, Nivanka manages Silverstripers. Like I said, digital agency, works around the world with global creative partners, and a lot of the work that they do, but not all of it, obviously, specialises in travel and tourism, reservation systems and things like that. Sort of projects we worked on, Queenstown, one of New Zealand's iconic destinations, Lake Wanaka over the hill, Coromandel, a lovely destination in the North Island of New Zealand, Enjoy, Illinois, based in Chicago in the US, very large site, and and they have large number of visitors annually, or used to, pre-COVID obviously, and Snow NZ, a specialist snow reporting website. I'm coming to you today from New Zealand, as I mentioned. Actually not today from Christchurch. I'm in the north of New Zealand, a place called Kaipara Harbour, which is about an hour north of Auckland. And that wasn't actually concept tonight, but it's how it is normally. So we're talking today about a case study, destination management and business logic. And then Nivanka in the second part will talk about the technical elements, what we've done and why we've done them. And you might have more questions for him than what you might have for I. So my role here really is just to talk about what we've done and why. So Sri Lanka, this slide here is one. We've got a video on the opening page. Scrolls through all the great features of Sri Lanka. Elephants, obviously. I was across there last year, and elephants are pretty cool, obviously. But a lot of people kind of struggle to understand where Sri Lanka is, and often it's called the teardrop of India. So it's the little island, maybe not so little, but at the southern end of India. Was a British colony, but gained independence in 1948. 22 million people, and interestingly, still 80% live in rural settlements. So while Colombo is the main urban area, still very rural, and there are a few reasons we'll talk about that shortly. Major exports, foreign remittances. So a lot of Colombian Sri Lankan citizens work overseas and send money back, so that's an export. Textiles and garments are a huge industry in Sri Lanka. Much clothing and what have you is made and exported around the world. Tourism is quite large. We'll talk about that in a second. And you might know Sri Lanka, especially if you're from the UK, for tea, because tea was introduced and has become a major industry there. And interestingly, around 1 million people of the 22 million in Sri Lanka still work in the production of tea in the country. Beautiful country, rich in resources and history and landscapes, and it has a maritime tropical climate. So it means that it's pretty warm all year round. It has a a dry season and rainy season essentially. So it's a fantastic tourism destination, culturally diverse, beautiful landscapes and scenery, and until recently, pretty undiscovered. And if you look at this graph here, you'll see that, in the last sort of 20 years or so, tourism was pretty static for the first 10 years of the decade, and there's a pretty good reason for that. there was a civil war that ran for 26 years, basically from 1983 to 2009. And if you look at the graph, it's pretty obvious that in 2010, tourism numbers started to rise, and they rose very dramatically over the last 10 years, or 9 years basically. A lot of that growth came from Europe, interestingly. So not the major market, but there's multiple markets, obviously, but a big European market for Sri Lanka, reasonably accessible through the Asian hubs. 2019, you'll see there's a drop, very unfortunate bombing, obviously, in that year. And then, of course, COVID in 2020, which has kind of decimated tourism globally, unfortunately. Prior to that, obviously, the country had a goal for tourism to become the #2 net foreign exchange earner. So number 1 is foreign remittances. Number 2 is, as I said, textiles and garments. And number 3 was tourism. So by 2025, the government had a goal of tourism getting to number 2 in terms of export value. But there were some real problems with that sort of growth. The country had just emerged from 26 years of civil war. So just imagine relatively small country and, a war that just kind of went on and on and on, obviously. As a result, investment in infrastructure had been minimal. So, when you're amidst the war, it's a civil war, and it was sort of, I guess it had, it was across the country. It wasn't a great time for investment, and of course, it wasn't a great time for tourists to come. Technology investment, as a result, was fairly minimal as well, and interestingly, adoption of technology was even lower. So, even now in Sri Lanka, while the country is changing very rapidly, the adoption of technology is still relatively low compared to many countries, and especially in the Western world. And the country, interestingly, was very inexperienced in tourism marketing. So when you've had 26 years of war, you're not really kind of, in the mix of, this is how we market our country, because you can't market your country particularly. People don't want to go to that really. So, interestingly, they had all these challenges. But the interesting thing was the war ended, and suddenly there was this feeling of safety, and tourists wanted to come. And they started coming in large numbers, obviously. They came for the history and culture, the natural landscapes, the people, and of course the food, which is just fantastic. And the thing was, the country was unprepared for that influx of visitors in every respect. So this is a little excerpt from the Sri Lankan Tourism Vision 2025. Unfortunately, these iconic assets are underutilized as an economic resource and a value-added tourism experience. In general, they are underinvested, inadequately managed, and not sufficiently linked to integrated supply chains and value-adding goods and services. Inconsistent and uncoordinated implementation with respect to regulation, planning, development, training, and promotion has meant that the tourism sector has not delivered the economic and social returns it can. So that's pretty damning on the country's response to tourism in some respects, and the vision is around trying to lift the country out of that and deliver a more professional, and more importantly, a product that is going to help deliver those social and economic returns. So essentially, Sri Lanka in 2009, when the Civil War ended, was 20 odd years behind other destinations, but with a rapidly growing visitor market that they may not have expected. So we saw two key opportunities. And the first one was visitors and delivering on the visitor journey. So the problems were that the country was very underfunded from a national marketing perspective. As I said, they didn't have a lot of experience in marketing their country as a destination. Whereas you look at Western countries and you look at New Zealand, for example, the pure New Zealand brand now is, I think, over 20 years old. And, you'd have to say we're experts in marketing our country. Sri Lanka is not. Correspondingly, there was a lack of quality destination information. So there was a desire to go to Sri Lanka, but not much information around what was there and what you could do. There was little or no authentic local content. And we know these days, in terms of destination marketing, that those authentic and local experiences are what is actually driving travel now. So people perceive those experiences were there, but there wasn't any local content in particular that was selling them. And there was virtually, and still is, no online booking aside from online travel agents or OTAs. And that's simply because the digital infrastructure doesn't exist, and certainly didn't exist 10 years ago. So our sort of view of this is that, and our way sort of thinking around solutions is that we wanted to build a visitor portal that kind of delivered on that visitor journey, that dream, plan, book, and we'll talk more about this in a second. The information that existed was very functional, very planning. This is what Sri Lanka has, and even that was quite limited. So we really wanted to sort of build something that was delivering what visitors were seeking. As a result, we've kind of developed over 500 activity and destination articles. We've developed the largest and most comprehensive tourism database of operators in Sri Lanka, over 3,000 so far, substantially more than what the government has. And online bookings are our next phase, and we'll talk about that shortly. So this is what we like to think is our visitor journey. And when we've worked, and I've worked with destination marketing organisations and regional tourism organisations in New Zealand and offshore, this is a model that was developed by Expedia in the early to late 2000s actually. And visitors go through a stage. They dream about the destination they want to go to. And so they think about, where do I want to go? And they have lots of choices, obviously, although not many choices currently in many parts of the world. In our country, you can go to New Zealand or New Zealand right now, and I'm sure many of you are the same. So you dream about the destination, and then you sort of decide on that destination, and you think, well, where do I want to go? And that's kind of, you've made that decision, and so what are all the things I need to know about that place? And that's the planning. So that's all that really dry information. How do I get there? How do I get around? What money do they use? All that sort of stuff like that. And then finally they go through, thirdly, they go through to the booking phase, which is that they've made that commitment, they want to transact. And online, obviously, these days, it's a given, but actually not in Sri Lanka. It's very difficult unless you're booking a hotel through Booking.com or Expedia. Virtually no activity in Sri Lanka is bookable, and so it becomes a real problem in terms of visitors planning those trips. And the fourth stage is the experience. People arrive in the destination, they experience that activity or that accommodation, and then finally they share their experiences around it. And this process used to be quite linear prior to mobile phones, but these days, of course, it's sort of people can be in any phase at any time, and that's what all these coloured lines are about. That you can be in a destination dreaming one night about what you're doing tomorrow, and then planning, booking, and experiencing it within 24 hours. So this is the model that we use for our destinations, basically. Still extremely relevant even today. So Sri Lanka, we're here to talk about it. We've looked at some of the numbers, and businesses also had a major problem, basically. A lack of digital infrastructure was one of the key things, essentially. A lack of technology adoption. Very few businesses in Sri Lanka, even now, have websites. A number more have email, but in reality, if you want to go and do an activity, in most cases, you need to pick up the phone and call. And here we are in 2020, and we're calling operators and to go and do a safari the next day and things like that. So for a lot of visitors to Sri Lanka who are incredibly digitally connected, this is incredibly frustrating. There's also a real problem in terms of on the ground, understanding from operators. They just don't understand because they're not, they're very small businesses typically. They might be a sole operator, and so they don't really understand marketing, sort of the online, sort of ecosystem, and they probably don't really understand marketing. And I think even in New Zealand, here we find some tourism operators who don't really get it. Sri Lanka, like I said, think back 20 years ago, basically. And then finally, there's a real lack of data. So a lot of us real seat of the pants, what do we think visitors want? What are they interested in? And so, we're really interested in trying to solve that problem of kind of developing more information around and more understanding about customer needs and product opportunities. So some of our solutions to this, or our solution to this is a portal to manage the website listings. So pretty simple and pretty standard actually in many countries these days. A basic website builder. And we all know that there's many website builders around, there's Wix and Squarespace and things like that. But essentially what we're trying to do is build something into, excuse me, an entire ecosystem that allows them to manage a listing, build a website, and then ultimately manage their inventory and things as well. Because, like I said, they're still using phones, many operators. And so to the consideration of having a property management system or something where they can, manage their bookings and then publish those online or connect them online is quite a stretch for many operators currently. We also think, like I said, that capturing data, some of that business intelligence to help us understand visitor behaviour will then help us actually deliver a better product for future visitors, because we understand what the market is looking at. And then finally, and I think this is actually a really important part of what we're doing, and this is not something we can make money from particularly, is a learning portal. So helping actually local businesses understand what those opportunities are online, SEO 101, all those sorts of things like that. So if we can actually develop a product there, and we have this vertically integrated solution right from a portal where customers or potential visitors are coming, and then we're connecting that to small businesses' websites and a property management system, and we've developed this learning portal for them to understand the opportunities online, then we've got a really nice solution. This is just a screenshot of the login to the portal. Nivanka will talk about more about this shortly. Just want to touch on our goals here quickly as well. So, it's tricky when you're going greenfields into a situation like this. But really, one of the core goals is online visibility and awareness of Sri Lanka as a destination, and really trying to profile some of those authentic local experiences, because we've got the chance to sort of go in at a low level here. I think 20 years ago, in many destination marketing sort of stories, but we're coming in with a 2020 perspective, and that's what those authentic local experiences are about. We're really looking for visitors who stay longer and spend more. So, Sri Lanka is not the cheapest ASEAN destination. So we're really looking for visitors who kind of understand and connect with the country before they're there. And part of that's by providing, just really comprehensive tourism information, something that hasn't been available before. And we're really interested in increased direct-to-operator bookings. So while some of the more advanced and more mature operators are using online travel agents, OTAs, many aren't. And if we can actually help provide or develop a system that is providing, that local ecosystem, means that we can deliver that at a lower cost and generate greater local prosperity, basically. So if less money is going to offshore OTAs, that's a really positive thing for the country. We're really interested, like I mentioned earlier, in increasing the digital capabilities of businesses, which means that hopefully, ultimately they can be more competitive online, because travel is competitive. Currently, a ton of pent-up demand, and so once the floodgates open of borders and what have you, there'll be a lot of travel. But ultimately, travel has been a very competitive sector. And lastly, competitive data and business intelligence. So there's not a lot of data around, especially online. So if we can collect that data, which we're doing through our portal now, we can use that to facilitate more informed planning and decision making. And that's not just about what we do online, that's about what visitors are interested in. Are they interested in safaris, or are they interested in surfing? And then let's help actually look at product development to better deliver on that. But really, what we're looking to do is help build some local value. So connecting those visitors with those local and authentic experiences, and driving value to those local businesses, which in turn delivers those economic benefits to the communities and generates employment. And that's what tourism does really well, and it is doing really well in Sri Lanka, or was until, of course, COVID. How do we make money from this? I'm sure we would have got some questions. It's pretty simple at this point in time. Site listings, and this is something that not very relevant in most countries any longer, because we all expect it for free. But in a developing country like Sri Lanka, there's still a value in listing on a portal like this. We're developing microsites. Think a Wix site, but much more simple for those businesses. It's a SaaS model, so we're charging essentially monthly to make it nice and affordable. We're looking at software licensing around the property management system that Nivanka will talk about, and I've touched on. We're potentially looking at online commissions for some of the online sales, less than OTA, obviously. And then we've got some opportunities for value-added services around that. Think, like Sam was talking earlier about custom and bespoke development that Silverstripe does so well, but also online marketing, a whole raft of things. So essentially, from our perspective, tons of upfront investment with not much return, But currently we're in discussion with the government around support in some way, because they've sort of recognised that what we're doing here is helping lift the capabilities, lift the visibility, and ultimately helping lift some of the economic outcomes that they might be expecting from the country. What else? So, summary. I'm nearly done. Nivanka's up next. So that sudden and rapid growth has created, considerable tourism potential. Obviously, clearly, COVID has put a bit of a roadblock in way, but hopefully, once that's we get through that, there's an expectation that tourism will still continue to grow rapidly in Sri Lanka. A lack of infrastructure has given us a rare opportunity to build from scratch, without 20 years of institutional or technical debt. So I say that because in any industry, you kind of have that technical debt or that institutional debt, and then ultimately it gets disrupted at some point in time. There's never been that industry to disrupt, so it's kind of greenfields at the moment. So there is no centralized tourism database in Sri Lanka aside from ours. So we've had the opportunity to build that from scratch with all those learnings we've had from destinations around the world, and it's really been that chance to truly engineer a better mousetrap. Screenshot of the site, and really that's all I've got to say. That's kind of some of the reasons around why we've done this and the business side of it. Nivanka is the technical side of the equation, and I shall hand over to him and let him talk further on that. So Nivanka.
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. So let me share my slides first. Hope you can see. When we came to this problem to collect all this data and build this system to have a marketing website with lots of compelling digital stories, and then have a listing database. I can echo. So we kind of identified 4 different sections or modules to the system. So one is the tourism listing database. So that is it's quite interesting how Sam explained the model admin and the use cases of that. So I think we've derived a lot from the model admins there, and we created a simple database of many tourism listings which can be of different types. So accommodating various types of businesses like accommodations, activity centers, rentals, and so on. And then we built an API on top of that, which is based on GraphQL, and which has different API endpoints to the system. So, and are focused on enabling various queries and mutations for various other modules of the system. And then the tourism website, of course, which Lawrence screen shared. And then the microsites. Microsites are I'd go through all of these in detail later. So microsites are pretty much a listing you can convert to a website, a functional website with multiple pages, and having the multiple layers of pages as well. So having parent-children relationships. And we built a block-based information management system. So which looks like Elementor, but is very simple compared to Elementor. And then the tourism portal. So that is where a user can subscribe and edit their listing and get it posted on our website. So going forward, so the listing database is pretty much built on model admins. It's interesting when Sam spoke about it. So to add to that, I think the grid fields are a huge technical advantage which we used, and the grid field item request classes, which we could extend quite easily and add in new forms and various other features, and use the Silverstripe default Silverstripe forms in there. So yeah, so with this one, what we did was we created. So we looked at how the Silverstripe CMS main is built, where like it has multiple left-hand main components, and we did the same here, took the same approach, but with a model admin. So we built like 4 model admins, one to display the pending listings, which users can submit, and then another one called portal pending, which listings we get from the portal, and then listings, which are like published and reviewed listings, and then the tick client listings. So the listings we say no. So yeah, so this is like, I want to call it a headless service, but it still uses the CMS parts of it. And we managed to plug in the Fly Systems S3 for this. So we could like put all the assets on a S3 bucket, where we can like, which enabled us to deviate all that traffic into different endpoints. And then, yeah, so all these parts of model admins, like, let us build the solution for a listing to get entered into the system and then reviewed in the system, and then somebody approves the listing, and then it goes to the next level where it appeared on the website. And then all these listings were categorized into locations using lat-long values. And here we did something, we extended the Silverstripe data model and introduced a new data type for the geographic data, where we could use polygons or points from the MySQL 5.7's data capabilities. And with that, we could like draw in polygons in a map and save that area within the database, where we could then query it, like query anything within that polygon, or query things like what are nearby to this other listing, or what are nearby to this region, and so on. Yeah, and then we also have a new, we also have a list of categories, a hierarchical model, where each category would be connected to a type of a class, where when you create a listing, we would like assign it to a category, and then the category would use the Silverstripe's injector to build that instance and create the actual data object. Yeah, and the other biggest bet is to like support about 30,000 listings. So Sri Lanka right now has like 30,000 accommodation businesses online on booking.com and collectively others. So we wanted to like get all that in. And in order to that, we kept this quite simple and used the core functionalities, but yeah, but also like wanted not to like build everything into a single place, so it could get like big and unmanageable. Yeah, so the next thing is the listing API. So it's pretty much on GraphQL, and so we needed like 2 or 3 API endpoints to connect to this database. So some of them are pretty much for reading data, just to render a site or just to render a page in the website, and some of those like are to collect data, like upload files, upload images, and then mutations to create these data and so on. Yeah, and with this, like, so we built a way, like some of these API endpoints were like CORS enabled, so we whitelisted certain domains and then let traffic from only those ones, and others were like either JWT authenticated or just like open for public. So yeah, and then some of those had like authenticator and rate limiting as well. Yeah, and this is the website and the listing pages we built. It's built on VueJS. So here, like, we would get all the locations in a tree sort of view, where you can like drill down into various levels, and same goes for categories, and then all the listings. which you can get from the GraphQL API. So with that, so with that we could build. We thought about it as a component-based front-end solution, where we also followed a bit of what Silverstripe has been doing. So we followed object-oriented hierarchy for GraphQL for Vue components. So each of these fields are like derived from one single class, and they have their own functionality on how to change the variable, how to change the query, and when to load the listings and when to speak to the server. So when to speak to the API. So we have that in, and then we have a map component built in there. Like when you move across the map or zoom in or zoom out, you could hear it would load up the listings which are like within that display area of the map. So yeah, and going forward, like this is the portal. So the portal is where like we get people to sign up, which is currently on a free plan, but we would introduce also like are planning to introduce paid plans on it. So this is like what we have done is to use Material UI and ReactJS to build a complete JavaScript-based portal to integrate to the listing database to connect over GraphQL and do all that read writes of data. A quite interesting point here is that we could save all the processing power which a normal Silverstripe installation would spend in terms of the looping and rendering and all that stuff, which you can find in the templates, and give that payload onto the client's browser. So that helped us quite well, and we could build a system which is quite fast, and the interactions are quite instant. So moving from one page to the other is like seamless. So it works with JWT authentications, and yeah, and built with Material and React and stuff. And then the microsites, like microsites at some point will get installed into the portal as well. So these are the ones which I described earlier. So smaller websites of a few pages, you can have as many as pages you want, and they have their own configuration options, and they have their themes, and the themes are like themes are built with Twig, where we have various Twig templates which are on a format, and then we what we did was to like have all this data with a listing, and then get them into an array of data and return a JSON to a smaller PHP application, which knows how to get a template and render all these data. So it was quite interesting. Like one of those questions in the previous presentation was around Twig. So as I've been doing this, I think like at a point where we could like write Twig and connect it quite easily to Silverstripe to render any sorts of viewable data. So yeah, so that is what it does. Like when you go to a certain domain name, it fetches the domain name, and then it connects to the server, connects to the API, and get a larger JSON of the whole microsite, and renders the pages and the and the smaller websites of them. And they have like they have some features of like changing the colors of the website and changing the fonts of the website, and then like with the composition of various blocks, it enables like creating different websites. So these are like two different websites which we've made with that. So two running websites with different templates. So you see like they've got all the navigation and the social icons, contacts and contact forms, etc. So a few important things we learned learned while doing this is like the model is the key. Like for any sort of project of this scale, like having the model done right is the key. If you have that, like if you could design that in a way like where it could be extensible and where it could be manageable, then like you could go a long journey. So yeah, defining that was one of the biggest challenges we had. And then like the Material UI and React, we managed to like build faster web applications, and we could also like use a lot of pre-built components of Material, and then with a very less time spent on styling it and so on, we could like build this whole application which looks like a professional application, right? So yeah, and then the centralized data API and the like lets us create like a stack of servers, like a stack of smaller EC2 instances, and connect them all into a single database. That allowed us to like expand the services and run them quite smoothly. Yeah. So right now we have about 30. Yeah. So right now we have about like 25 of these microsites running on the system, and it really takes like about 30 minutes to spin up a new site. It's like you go in there and create a listing and then enable it and add your pages, and then your site is up. So yeah. Yeah. So going forward, like we are planning on collecting all these data and using some machine learning stuff to connect it to Silverstripe, and then collect data so we can provide like personalized content. So right now, like it's still in very early stages of dev, or maybe, well, to be more clear, like it's in various early stages of research. And what we want to do is to like collect as much as data we want, and then connect it to an elemental module and build these custom pages for various users to help them to dream their next tour. So we are planning to like use a lot of historical navigation data, and then demographics of different users and what they viewed and so on, and then have cookies and sessions, use cookies and sessions to like determine where he's coming from and what he would need and what he would like look into. And the other thing is like property management, which is the primary booking system. So we are planning the model out there. So everything we build starts with a listing. So the listing is the core sort of component, and all the rest of the stuff like are built around that. And in this case, like we are planning to have all the room types. Well, the accommodation bookings goes first. Like we might be able to like go for other areas, but right now we are like focused on the accommodation bookings. So we have the room types, room rates, and the availabilities, like, and special rate periods and so on. All that stuff like built around the listing. And we are planning on like building this API to allow various React components to connect to this and query the availabilities and create a booking, and then finally process the payments, which would then record a booking for that user and trigger all the emails and things which they want. Yeah, so that is where we are looking to go. And well, that concludes it. I would, well, if you have any questions like around the things we built, it would, yeah, shoot out. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Hi. Yep.
Great showcase. Thanks a lot. Super cool to see what you guys did there. And I think there's a lot of stuff going on in the tourism section when it comes to Silverstripe. So it's that newzealand.com, and I was reading something about Bosnia and Herzegovina too. So seems like a good match, tourism and Silverstripe. Well, about questions. Somebody asks about the JWT implementation. Nivanka, could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so we use the, so there's a JWT module which is done by TractorCow, I think. So we pretty much use that and enable the, so it shares the, so you have to send the username, email, password, and things to the server where then you would get a key. And you can do the rest of the communications with the server by using that key. So it's pretty much quite straightforward, and we use the module for JWT. I just posted it here.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Any more questions?
It's not TractorCow, it's FireSpace. I just added the link. Did you use GraphQL for the website presentation as well, in addition to management? If that's the case, did you deal with caching? Did you use GraphQL for the website presentation as well? If that's the case, did you deal with caching? I'm not sure I get that. Lawrence, do you? Right. I take this one. How did you find working with S3 and Fly system? It was quite easy. You just had to install the Fly system module and connect the S3 buckets. And the only thing we had to worry about was using different S3 buckets for different stages of the site. So yeah, so it's quite straightforward. It's a set of YAML configs. YAML configs grouped into different sections, different stages of the website. So dev, production, and all that stuff. What was the key changes in the model to allow 30K records? What was the key changes in the model to allow 30K records? So one thing was one thing we saw was that there'd be a lot of images and assets. So what we in order to sort that, we use the S3 stuff. So we were planning on a basic level, we were planning 5 images per listing. So 30K records is 150K images. So the biggest one was, I think, we planned to take out the images and put them in S3. And the other thing is that we use multiple model admins, which could filter out the data at a lower level when it gets the data lists, and then use that. So we wouldn't have to take all the data and filter them before we present it. So that is another key approach. Yes, Miyu. I meant FireSphere. Oops.
Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe one last question, because the next scheduled slot is due in 2 minutes. So okay. Garion wants to know something.
What led you to use React in one section of the project and React in the others? Yeah, it was quite interesting. I think I knew Vue at the point better than React. So and Vue was Vue was in the scene and pretty much trending over. So and what I wanted to do is build this component-based thing. And all right, in another case, we could use Silverstripe templates and have the Vue tags in the templates, and then have that in the code base. So rather than using DHTMLX, we could use Silverstripe to do the templating. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So guys, thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Julian.
Great having you. Take care, and I assume you'll be sticking around if somebody has some more questions over the chat or in the networking section, right?
Yep. For sure. Cheers, Julian.
Cheers.
Thanks guys.
Thanks, guys.